This is the University of Liverpool Podcast. I'm Neil Morrison. On today's episode, Peter Kinderman is back. This time, he's here to discuss why we like to be scared. It's an odd thing when you think about it. For much of the year, people struggle to keep their anxiety in check, but then Halloween comes around and suddenly everyone flocks to films about killer clowns. Or they struggle with depression, but then look forward to dressing up like the Grim Reaper. Or, for example, a couple of years ago, one Halloween enthusiast near where I live, he decorated his lawn with a car crash scene. It was gruesome and disturbing, and people loved it. Peter Kinderman says there's a good reason for this, and that's coming up.
You're listening to the University of Liverpool Podcast, brought to you by the University of Liverpool online programs. Make a plan to advance your career today. Study a postgraduate degree with a world-class university without leaving your home or full-time job. You don't have to go far to go further.
When the movie adaptation of Stephen King's novel, It, was released, it shot up to the number one position.
People die or disappear 6 times the national average. And that's just grown-ups.
Worldwide, the film has brought in more than $650 million. It is the story of a group of boys who battle a shape-shifting, murderous clown who moves through the sewers. It's ridiculous, right? And terrifying.
Bill, if you'll come with me, you'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too.
And one of the reasons it is so terrifying is that the villain is a clown. So let's start there. Peter Kinderman, why are clowns so scary?
Well, frightening clowns is a very interesting issue because quite a lot of people are frightened of clowns, and a large number of people find them creepy and unpleasant in some ways. And I think there are lots of reasons for it. One of the weird things that happens with clowns is that they're targeted at children, obviously, but they are really very peculiar. So you've got adults, usually men, with very, very unusual, exaggerated facial features, sort of distorted, caricature facial features, behaving in very strange ways. And your parents behave in very strange ways in response, which is instead of saying, wow, danger, threat, get behind me, I will now strike him with a baseball bat, they go, ha ha ha, isn't this funny? A really distorted looking, very strange person wearing outlandish clothes is coming towards us, is behaving in completely weird ways, and I'm just laughing. And of course your kid is going, why on earth is my parents acting so bizarrely towards this quite unusual experience? So a lot of kids don't like clowns, a lot of people. And there's also, I think, from my perspective, which is very biased and particular, one of the things that's going on with clowns is we're all told that we should find them funny and amusing, and actually they're not very funny and they're pretty bizarre, and I don't like them very much. And I can imagine if I was a kid, I'd go, there's nothing very funny about watching a grown man falling over repeatedly, and why is he dressed so weird? I don't understand why my family has suddenly changed their demeanor towards quite frightening things out there.
But actually, you tap into something quite interesting there, though, which is that it may be for most children the first time they have any glimmer of awareness that they may not be able to trust their parents' perception of the world. Up to that point, they have turned to their parents. The parents have said, oh yeah, no, that's frightening, that's dangerous, you can't do that. And then this clown comes along, which by any measure, objective measure, the parent should be pulling you away from, saying, that's not, that also. Much like jumping off the slides, that's not safe. The weird person running right at you is also not safe. And yet they change their mind there. And so there must be a moment of strange disconnect and sort of vertigo around that just sort of, I don't want to get too intense, but
no, and I think that's true. I don't think it's related only to clowns or to Halloween or to other things. I think when you're a kid, what happens is a lot of things that occur in your family life are pretty much predictable, but there are quite a lot of things that happen in very unusual ways. And sometimes we're very good and we explain those things to our kids before they happen. Sometimes they sort of pop into a child's life in quite an unexpected way. One of the things that's quite interesting, I think, is that a lot of those slightly challenging and slightly unusual ideas happen when we're in company. So we do these things in groups, and there's a certain sort of safety in groups for the kids. They see the community acting in this way, and so, if my son was 6 years old and he got up bleary-eyed one morning and found that his parents were wearing clown suits and hitting each other with big rubber mallets, that would be really bizarre. But you go to a community area where everybody's having fun and enjoying it, it kind of signals to the kid something interesting is going to happen now. And I guess it's the same with Christmas, with summer holidays, with Halloween. There are cultural signals that say this is going to happen. So, I mean, I guess a prediction that would follow would be that if you go to a fun fair and see a clown, you're probably less freaked out by it than if you saw one stepping off the number 17 bus at half 8 in the morning on your way to work.
Yeah, that's a little more frightening.
Yeah. Maybe, I mean, that's kind of part of, again, it's this weird mix of comedy and horror, isn't it? Because that's both, there's something about humor, which is the unexpected juxtaposition of two ideas which don't fit together and cause a little bit of cognitive uncertainty. So yeah, coming across a clown stepping off your commuter train in the morning would be both really quite frightening and hilarious at the same time.
Do you like being scared? Do you like scary movies?
I like being scared. I guess I like being scared while I'm in control. So the answer has to be yes and no, and that's the paradox in it all. I like to be scared as long as I'm not really scared. I mean, I don't really want to be scared. I want to flirt with scariness.
It's interesting. We seem to have, you've touched on it, a love-hate relationship with fear and stress. We
flirt with it.
Yeah, we love it. We seek out things that scare us or make us anxious, and yet in our personal life, anxiety or stress are major mental health issues. So how do we square that circle?
Well, I think in part it's because one of the things that we do, and this is kind of at the heart of it, is we want to explore these ideas in a relatively safe format. So what we don't do is put ourselves at risk, but what we do is we do safe things that nevertheless trigger some of the responses of fear. And I think that's, in a sense, that's not only compatible with the idea that serious forms of anxiety or fear or even depression can be serious mental health problems. It's also that, in a sense, because those things are major mental health problems, it's sensible for us as a species, really, to develop a way of exploring and manipulating, playing with, testing out those ideas. If we didn't have a way of managing anxiety, we'd be floored by it every time it came up for real. And so I think we play with these ideas a bit like a kitten plays with a ball of string, because you're preparing yourself for things that are a little bit more serious later on. So we learn to manage anxiety, we learn to control our fears, we learn what are the safe and acceptable parameters, we learn how to talk to each other about fears. And that's all, it's not incompatible with the fact that anxiety is also a serious mental health problem. It's part of the mechanism of dealing with it. One of the things that occurred to me when I was thinking about this, because Halloween is not only about scariness, it's also about the sort of macabre as well. And for a long time in sort of Western European history, we've had memento mori. So people have deliberately carried around representations of death. A little bit similar to the sort of goth subculture that we have now, but certainly in Victorian times, people had skulls and death's heads on walking canes. In medieval times, people had a lot of visual reminders of death surrounding them. And this wasn't because those folk were macabre. It's not because goths now in our subculture are macabre. It's because what they're doing is they're actively thinking about an important issue. It's good for us. It's good for you and me to think about death. It prepares us for life to think about death. And so the culture of images of death, the culture, the goth culture, and the culture of Halloween are all about little reminders, safe reminders to get us to think a little bit more than we otherwise might about things that we sometimes want to avoid.
And there's also the aspect, as you mentioned earlier, of control. One of the funny things about Halloween that happens is people show up with very macabre costumes. Their arms, limbs have been amputated, and the face is melting. And the proper reaction is to either shock, usually followed by laughter. So laughing at the macabre seems to be a critical part of it.
So one of the things that a word that occasionally pops up in the field of mental health, in the field of clinical psychology, is about mastery. So instead of just doing something, and as well as just enjoying something, there's a question of mastering this thing. So we get a sense of well-being, we get a sense of positivity if we can learn a new skill and we become a master of our craft. If we have a puzzle and we learn how to master it, and it often even happens with games and playthings, and even games you can play on your mobile phone. When you get the hang of it, you get a certain reward. You go, I've cracked this, I know how to deal with this, I've got this one knocked off. And then you sort of lose interest in them because the act of mastering a new skill is really rewarding. So we've got control, and we've got exploration within a safe space, and we've got mastery. And you've got the mastery of fear. And to laugh at scary things is a way of us demonstrating, and of course laughter is a way of demonstrating to other people. Laughter is a communication device. When we laugh at ghouls and ghosts and witches and devils and the stuff of Halloween, what we're doing is we're demonstrating our mastery of scary things, of death, of frightening things. And that's good. And it's a good message to give to our children as well. I'm the master of the scary, dark things that creep out from under your bed at night. I'm in charge of this, and not only am I in charge of this, I can play with it and I can laugh at it. It's good.
Is that used? Is there something we can learn from that in a therapeutic sense? That a way of dealing with anxiety or a way of dealing with fears or depression, if the depression is a deep sense of malaise, is through that form of mastery or through finding ways of laughing at them or facing it?
Oh, both, yes. So it is certainly true that university professors and clinical psychologists tend to be a bit po-faced. That's just true. But in therapy, certainly the idea of mastery and playing with the phenomena is part of it. So, it's good to allow people to know that they can bring on and dismiss those issues. It's good to say, okay, well, let's now, if you're in a comfortable position, let's start thinking about the things that distress you. But you and I will be able to, at the end of the session, we'll be able to put them to bed, and we'll be able to clear things up, and we'll be able to move on. And we can control the therapeutic session by almost switching on or bringing on and then allowing to dissipate the difficult emotions and the things that we deal with. So you teach people to be in control of their emotions. The most obvious one is with people who have panic attacks, where often in therapy, you would demonstrate to people that if, for instance, they start to hyperventilate, they start to get the sensations of panic. Now, if you do that in a controlled way, it's a very powerful demonstration that these events aren't totally inexplicable and outside of our control, but you can bring them on and dismiss them. The same happens sometimes with people who hear voices, where you can demonstrate, for instance, that if you put in in-ear earphones and listen to talk radio or sometimes music, the hallucinations change in their nature. So you can do something to change these quite frightening experiences that you're having. So yes, you actively work with people in therapy to demonstrate that you can have control over the situation. And absolutely, if you go to see a therapist, if you go to see a clinical psychologist, and that person appears not to have a sense of humor, then that would be something to put on your checklist of this woman's a good therapist. I was going to say, if they don't have a sense of humor, go and see somebody else, but I thought I'd just pull away from that just a little bit. But of course you should have a sense of humor. And I am joking about it. And Halloween is not the world's most important psychotherapeutic technique, but the idea, like in Mexico, of having the Day of the Dead with controlled exploration of some of our worst fears, with laughter and with joy and with fun, and some food and some candies chucked at people, and turning it into a kid's plaything. That's us laughing in the face of death. That's what we should do. That's what being alive is all about.
If you go to your psychologist and they are wearing a clown mask, though.
If you go to see your psychologist who's wearing a clown mask, I suggest that you rapidly get out your mobile phone, dial emergency services, pick up half a brick and run away as fast as you can. That's wearing a clown mask is probably not a recommended element of treatment.
Okay,
no,
it's good to know. Good. It's another thing I'll add to my checklist.
It's important that and wearing clothes at all time. Keep it on the list.
It reminds me actually of something the psychologist and novelist Keith Oatley he calls stories the flight simulators of social life.
Absolutely,
because they guide relationship expectations. It's a great image for it, and it makes me think Halloween is that. But we're doing this all the time. It seems like when we read novels and read stories and go to movies.
We absolutely do. So a colleague of mine here at Liverpool, Phil Davis, is a professor of English literature, and he and I have worked a little bit together, but we talk a lot more and get on very well. And one of the ideas that he has, which I think is 100% correct, is that great literature is the same. So from the oral tradition back with the ancient Greeks and the Romans and the Babylonians, what we have is stories that are shared with other people, that are shared amongst communities, that give us available models or examples of how to deal with challenges. So we see these archetypes, these heroic and tragic archetypes from literature. We hear these stories. We learn how not to do things. We learn how not to betray your friends. We learn how to stand by the people who are important to you. We know what falling in love is about, and we know what being betrayed is about. And we learn these from great literature. And exactly that, flight simulators, possible ways in which our lives might pan out based on the lives of other people. I mean, including the fact that back in Athens, where not, of course, either the women or the slaves, we have to remember that the concept of democracy wasn't quite democracy in ancient Athens, but people used to go to the theatres to watch plays. And one of the things that happened during the play acting was that the chorus would turn to the audience and say, effectively, you've seen what the two actors have been challenged by on stage. What would you do in that situation? What audience would you choose to do in that situation? And that's important because the audience were the voters. So when they were being challenged, what would you do about the possibility that this foreign power might invade your city? What would you do, citizens, in this play-acted scenario? What you're doing is you're practicing for when those same people will have to make a vote on whether to go to war in a year or two's time. So the great plays of literature, the great plays of the theatre tradition were about people practicing how to think and therefore how to act in a particular situation. And to bring us back to the topic of today's conversation, that's what's happening when we're talking about ghouls and ghosts and witches and demons. We're talking about death. We're talking about supernatural ideas, but we're also talking about fear and anxiety and how we learn to master it.
And one of the ways of mastering it is becoming familiar with it. Another way is to shift our emotional response to it, to try to find other ways, whether it's through celebration, as you mentioned, or laughter, or just experiencing a blast of fear and moving past it. And sometimes it's subversion as well. So some cultures have traditions where the servants are served by the masters. There's oftentimes, it's of course positively less relevant these days, but there have been celebrations in other cultures where the traditional roles of the genders are reversed. And so there's this idea of subversion being a way of
controlling and playing with the way that we should think about and emotionally respond to these sorts of ideas. So yeah, having the good citizens of the city of Mexico dressing up as skeletons and zombies is a way of subverting the power of the fear of death.
What will you be doing on Halloween?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Halloween, 31st of October. I will actually be in Australia.
Terrifying.
Well, the thing is that given that you've said that, I will be faced with snakes and spiders and sunburn, all of which are real, genuine. I mean, I won't be particularly worried about demonic clowns. I will be worried about not putting my finger in a hole of one of these spiders that could cause my hand to swell and drop off. So I suspect I will be, what will I be doing? I'll be going to the beach and enjoying myself and avoiding spiders is what I'll be doing on Halloween.
You know what you should do? This is just my recommendation, is that you should, in the lead up, just have people around you place rubber spiders and rubber snakes just in odd places, just to practice this and to get to a place where you can laugh at them.
Yeah, that's very good advice, and I think you'll make a very good psychologist. I was thinking of dealing with the spider issue by avoiding spiders.
It's also good. Also a good approach.
That also works.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Peter Kinderman is a professor of clinical psychology at the University of Liverpool. And that's it for this episode. I hope you have a safe, fun, and I don't know, let's hope for a therapeutic Halloween. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who has subscribed to the podcast and who downloads it regularly. We made it to number 5 in the iTunes Higher Education charts in the UK this week, which was great to see. Thanks as well to all the people who have given us a rating and a review in iTunes. We really appreciate it. If you like the podcast, please share it, rate it, review it. Let's see if we can make it to number 1. I think it's possible. We'll be back in 2 weeks. I'm Neil Morrison. Thanks so much for listening.
You're listening to the University of Liverpool podcast, brought to you by the University of Liverpool online programs. Make a plan to advance your career today. Study a postgraduate degree with a world-class university without leaving your home or full-time job. You don't have to go far to go further.